Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So announcements first, I recently started an MBTI blog, so definitely check out the link in the description below. And also if you want to learn more about Enneagram and related subtypes, it is a very fascinating personality test that can allow you to learn about yourself beyond MBTI. It's a very useful tool, so definitely consider signing up for the program, and I would also drop the link below in order to gain like an in-depth knowledge of Enneagram. So in the last video, I actually talked about like what it's like being an Enneagram 5 wing 4. If you do not have a very foundational like understanding of Enneagram, make sure also to just do the Enneagram test. It's freely available online, and to check out which of the 9 types that you are. I would say that this personality test is very useful when it comes to finding career paths, and also when it comes to just knowing like your general core set of values and beliefs. But today I'm not going to focus on the Enneagram 9 types. I'm going to focus on the subtypes of Enneagram, which is something that can be very confusing to people when they first get into it, and it is something that I found out recently, to be honest, because for the longest time, when you go on like online websites or blogs on Typology, you may see people write something like INFJ, Enneagram 4, and then SX/SO, something like that, okay, an example. And that can be very confusing for people who have just seen it for the first time. They're like, what does that mean? Like SXSO? Like it sounds very technical, like a jargon, and a lot of times it can be a little bit off-putting to people who have no idea what that is. But if you actually know what that is, it is a very interesting theory that can actually allow you to understand a lot more about yourself. So I feel like with every expanding theory, it just allows you to see another side of yourself, because we are all comprised of a lot more than just our MBTI type. So within our MBTI type, we have like different flavors of the same MBTI type. Instinctual variance, it's like another layer to your personality. So here we have 3 instinctual variants. So we have self-preservation, we have sexual, and we have social. And at first glance, you may not be able to really understand it, because when I first look at the 3 instinctual variants, I assume what they mean based on the surface, look of the word. So when I see social, I thought, oh, that just refers to someone who is very social, someone who is like probably an extrovert, So does that mean if you prize social above all the other instinctual variants like sexual and self-preservation, it just means that you are very outgoing, like you're very extroverted? And I thought, oh, I can never be like prioritizing social as my instinctual variant. And then there's sexual, which I again assume it in the wrong way. So I thought, oh, it just means that you maybe like to, engage in a lot of sexual activities with strangers. Like you don't mind, because you are just so highly sexual in nature, or either that, or it means that you have like a high sex drive. Like that's what I thought when I saw the instinctual variants, like the words for the first time. I mean, obviously I couldn't be more wrong. And then self-preservation, I thought, oh, that's me, because I'm an introvert. Like I typically tend to not want to get into too much drama or too much trouble. So I'm like, oh, maybe self-preservation is my first instinctual variant, which means like you prize it the most. So out of the 3, typically we would have 2 strong ones, and the third one is something that we kind of neglect compared to the first 2. So for example, if someone writes, I am an INFJ Enneagram 4 SX/SO, it means that the person is INFJ Enneagram 4 and sexual, social. So this person prizes her sexual variant the first, and then followed by the social variant. Okay, so the short form is just a way for people to be able to include it in the personality, because it just makes it easier. Because if you spell it out, it's like sexual, social, it's quite long, you know? So that's just a short form. It's not really a jargon. It's not really something that is super mysterious. It's just an instinctual variant. When I really got into like the definitions of the instinctual variants, I began to fully understand what each one means, and it's very, very interesting, and it's really something that I never thought of myself as. Like when I got tested for the instinctual variants and I read the explanation, I was very, very surprised to find out that my instinctual variant was actually social sexual. So that's an instinctual variant that I never thought I would be. Firstly, I never thought that I would lead with social. That was like the number one shock value. Like, I just never knew that I could be seen that way, because I thought that, again, social variant is like mainly for like hyper outgoing people, but no. So let me explain to you what the three variants actually mean. So for social, it's not really referring to you being crazy extroverted. It's actually referring to how much you value social connections. So someone with a social variance would really value group. And I don't mean that they necessarily would sacrifice their own values for group value, because that's not how I am. I mean, maybe some people with social variance would do that. But for me, because of my overall personality as an INFJ and also an Enneagram 4 person, I definitely value my own authenticity above group values. So how it works for me is that as someone who leads with the social variant, I care a lot about belonging. So typically people with this emphasis would go out of their way to seek out friends that they can really connect to. I mean, some people, the unhealthy type of social variants, may actually change themselves to fit the group. But for me, again, it's not part of my value system to do that. Like, I would feel so unloved if I were to force myself to fit in, and then, you know, they don't actually know the real me. I would actually feel worse if that's the case. But the commonality across like all social variants is that we really, really value social connections with people. So we really value like friendships and just relationships with people in general. And we need like this community that we can feel a sense of belonging in. And we need it like way more than the other two, sexual and self-preservation, which I will explain later what they mean. So for someone with a social variant, what can really, really affect them is if they feel like they cannot fit in, or they feel like they don't have a community that supports them. They don't feel like they have a stable social kind of foundation. That can really, really affect their health, their emotions. And this is totally true for me, because like I value social connections so much. I value just the connections between people. So I would go out of my way to, you know, find the meetup groups where I can actually meet people who can understand me. And if I am in a group where I don't feel like people understand me, or I don't feel like I really belong there, I would leave. Like, I don't want to be that part of that trauma, you know. It literally gives me trauma if I'm forced to be in a group of people who don't value me, who don't understand me, who treat me like some, you know, random person whom they don't have much in common with, and just kind of ignore me. I would get out of the situation fast, because like I said, it can lead to a lot of unhappiness. So I think, honestly, only social variants would do this. Like, literally the main reason I quit my last job wasn't really because of the boss. It wasn't really because I was underperforming. It was literally because I felt like I couldn't click with the coworkers there. And I know that sounds a bit weird for someone who have like a different priority. Like, if someone is self-preservation first, that person will be like, that's crazy. You have a stable income, you have, a nice place to work in, you're not in any kind of danger. So why are you like quitting your job just because you cannot click with your coworkers? Like, that's crazy. And I wasn't being bullied either. I mean, not really by my coworkers. They just don't seem to have anything in common with me. And so I like struggle during lunch because it's really nothing to say. And they always have like their own group of friends. And firstly, there wasn't a lot of people in my age group, to be honest. And within the people in my age group, because it was so few, I just couldn't find like my group, you know what I mean? And not like there were many to choose from either. And it's just like I just couldn't click with any of them, literally. Like, I've never been in a workplace where I couldn't click with any of them in the past. But unfortunately, in recent times, I have. So it's like so bad for me. I just couldn't be at work with people whom I cannot click with at all. Like, it's just literally nothing in common. And the only person I had in common with was someone who wasn't in my age group. And so she doesn't really like have lunch with the rest of us. And so that's very difficult for me to find someone to talk to during lunch. And that was actually pretty impactful when it comes to my emotional well-being. That affected me a lot more than other personalities with different, emphasis, because I really care about a sense of belonging, and I really care about being around people who support me and who can understand me, that kind of thing. I need to feel like I'm valued. I'm a valued member of the group. I would say like I'm not a very mainstream type, so I really, really try to find like my group of people whom I can really just be myself with, because this is very, very important to my well-being. So this is for the social variance. Like, you need to belong. You need to feel loved and supported by a group. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a very huge group of friends, because I don't, and I don't want that either, because if you have a huge group of friends, firstly, it's difficult to keep track of, and secondly, definitely the quality would not be as high. You don't have like enough time with each person and so on. So I still value like intimacy, but I need like a small group where I can really, really feel, myself in. So the second variance for me is sexual, and sexual doesn't mean like what you think it means, okay? Sexual means that you value intimacy. So intimacy, it's one-on-one intimacy. It can be with like your boyfriend or your best friend. It doesn't have to be a lover. But definitely, yes, sexual means that you value intense connections with people, and definitely that's true for me as well. So I actually prize social over sexual. So I actually need a group to belong to, and I need a community of support before that one-to-one intimacy. That actually makes quarantine really difficult for me, especially if I'm alone. It may not be that bad if you live with people who are like-minded. So at least you have like a group of people that you can talk to. So for sexual variance, okay, people who lead with sexual instinctual variance, they prize one-on-one interactions. So the good thing about sexual variance is that they really, really care about intimacy. They really, really want to know you in depth, and they can really prize relationships a lot. And it can be romantic or non-romantic relationships, but it's a lot of times it is romantic relationship, because that's when you really are one-to-one. Whereas with friends, you can be like 1-2 or 1-5, but with relationships, most of the time it is one-to-one. So sexual variance people tend to be very immersed in like romantic fantasies, and they want like to find a soulmate. But the flip side to that is they can be carried away and even jump from relationship to relationship, because they want to get that high, that intensity from this, intimate relationship, and that can lead to a kind of addictive personality. But that is for people who really, are extreme in this area. And then for the self-preservation one, it is very interesting. So self-preservation types of people, or short form SP, they are basically concerned with themselves. Like they're concerned with their own comfort, their own financial status. They are concerned with like maybe gaining wealth, maybe gaining like a stable income. Like they want to have a nice place to live in. They are concerned with like the surroundings. And it doesn't mean that if you are of other instinctual variants that you don't care about comfort. Of course, everyone does to a certain degree, but self-preservation people, they put that in front of everything else. So they prioritize their own financial stability and comfort above a need to belong in a group and above a need for one-to-one intimacy. So to them, everything else is kind of secondary. It's like it's nice to have, but it's not a necessity. So for example, if you maybe reject them socially, typically it would not impact them as much as it would impact someone who is of a social variant like me. They would probably just be like, oh, whatever. Like they would brush it off. That is considering if they don't have social in their main like instinctual variant. So maybe if they are like SP, SX, so self-preservation followed by sexual, so they don't really care about like having to have a group that accepts them or having like-minded individuals around them. They don't really care. They just want their own, stable lifestyle and having like enough money to spend. They would probably be very involved in like a healthy lifestyle as well, because they want to make sure that they are in a good state in terms of their body. So they would be very, very intense on improving their physical self and also like the surroundings. They don't really care that much about like one-to-one relationships if they don't have the sexual elements. So they may not prize relationships as much. They may not be as obsessed with like romanticizing people, and they may go like years without dating maybe, or they don't see it as like, oh, I have to find a date today, or I have to find like a boyfriend this year. They don't really care. So I would say self-preservation type actually has a very, very smooth sailing time during this quarantine season because they don't really need to go out. I mean, not to say that they don't need to, especially if they're extroverts and self-preservation, then maybe they still need to be around people. But if they are an introvert and self-preservation mode is like their first instinct, they probably don't really need to go out because they just want to have their own comfort, their own financial. Okay, maybe the finance part is where they get stressed out with, but not really about like going out and meeting people. It doesn't really bother them as much as their financial state. One important thing to notice is also how this instinctual variance can behave. And you can actually recognize people and their variance based on how they seem to others. So typically people with a leading social variance, they would be pretty open to talking to people. And they would be pretty friendly towards you from the beginning. And they have this kind of a little bit of a cheeky side, like witty, not very serious side to them. So even though I'm an INFJ, which is considered a serious personality because of my social variance, I can seem a lot more lighthearted, I guess, even though I do have a serious side as well. When you know me, I can seem pretty lighthearted in many situations, and especially around people whom I can click with. However, for sexual and self-preservation leading people, they can seem to be a little more intense. So even among their friends, for example, sexual variance leading people, they can seem more like sensitive and intense, and they just have this vibe about them. no matter whether they're introverts or extroverts, actually. They still have like a little bit of an intensity that you can feel. And people leading with self-preservation, they are more private. Like even for extroverted people who have this self-preserving variance as the first instinct, they would still seem a little bit aloof, even when they are, polite to you and they get to know a lot of people. But you can tell, there's some side of them that they are not really getting people to know that much because they don't see it as a necessity. They don't see it as that important to get to know people or to have a community around them. So this is pretty much like my understanding of the instinctual variance so far, and I think it is so interesting to me because it explains to me how different INFJs seem different, because I always thought like, oh yeah, I'm an INFJ and I'm like Enneagram 5 to 4. Those are like pretty intense, personalities. But how come I feel like in real life, sometimes I seem to be like a little bit like an extrovert, and I'm not, but I can seem that way around like people I'm really close to and people I can click with. And when it comes to people I don't click with, it's the opposite. I just am very closed off because I just don't have anything to say. Your variants are the ones who determine like what you value when it comes to like instinctual stuff, what you value when it comes to survival. So for people with social variants, they really cannot survive without a sense of belonging to some kind of community. And it doesn't have to be a huge one. And for self-preserving types, they need to feel like they are safe, that they have enough money, they have enough food, and they would really go to lengths to make sure that they do have it. And for sexual variants, they care a lot about intimacy. They can go the extra mile just to find your soulmates or, find that one special person to share all the secrets with. So this is just a summary of the variants. Let me know what your instinctual variants are. If you know it, or if you don't know, you can take the test and still comment down below. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.